Welcome to today's PDAC webinar, Mining Investment Funds Made in Quebec, which is the 10th of the 16 sessions in the Fasken series. My name is Michael Barassa. I'm a partner in Fasken's Toronto office and a member of the PDAC Program Committee. This is Fasken's 11th annual PDAC seminar series. This year we are doing it virtually like PDAC itself, which started today. We have people joining us today from all over North and South America, from the UK, Europe, South Africa, and Australia. We would also like to welcome those of you joining us on YouTube Live and LinkedIn Live. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. For the online survey, at the end of the webinar, please click the survey link beneath the video to fill in our survey. Your input is greatly appreciated. For questions during the webinar, if you have a question, please type your question into the chat box beside the video. Today's panel will do their best to answer all of the questions. For technical support, if you require that, please click the Tech FAQs or Tech Support Chat, which is located under the question chat box. And for materials, the bios for today's speakers can be accessed from the materials button under the video player. And now I'll turn things over to Frank Mariage, a securities, corporate law, and mining law practitioner in our Montreal office, to introduce and moderate today's panel.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everybody. Maybe an introductory remark. You will notice that we have a speaker that is missing today. Unfortunately, Mr. Stéphane Poitras was not able at the last minute to make this webinar. He deeply apologizes for this. Obviously, it is what we call a force majeure. So again, his apologies, and we'll make sure to entertain you enough in his absence. Before I get into to the weeds, as we say, I'd like to introduce our fellow panelists, which I would. First one is Mr. Amiot Choquette from Investissement Québec. Bonjour Amiot. Followed by Serge Côte of the Fonds de solidarité des travailleurs du Québec. Bonjour Serge. Monsieur Paul Carmel, président directeur général de SIDEX. Bonjour Paul. Et finalement Angelina Mehta de Valeur Mobilière Banque Laurentienne. Hello, everybody, and thank you for accepting my invitation. Greatly appreciated. Obviously, today we're talking about mining investment funds, and the purpose of that is to explore what is this ecosystem that we have in Quebec that doesn't really exist anywhere else. Before we get into that, maybe a few remarks of what is mining in Quebec. As you know, on February 23rd, the Fraser Institute released its survey of mining companies. Relating to the top and worst jurisdictions in the world for mining. This year, we are very happy with the result. Quebec came in 6th place as the most attractive, one of the most attractive jurisdictions in mining, for mining investment. We were all know another province in Canada, Saskatchewan, came in 2nd. Congratulations to Saskatchewan, obviously. But we're very proud of our 6th place. And a few numbers for you. Right now, there are 21 active mines in Quebec, 8 of which are gold mines. And there are 5 mines that are on care and maintenance and that are looking to be restarted. We're talking about virtually close to 50,000 jobs. Last year, in investments in mining complexes for infrastructure, and maintenance, etc., there was close to just a bit over $2.3 billion that was invested in the province of Quebec. As for exploration and development of projects, close to 600 million, I'm sorry, that was invested. So put those two numbers together, we're talking about something close to $3 billion in investment in the province of Quebec related to mining. So obviously, there has to be a structure that supports that. And that's one of the things we're going to explore today. It's the investment structure. Over the years, we've been fortunate enough, Quebec, to build this ecosystem of these various funds that I presented to you just a few minutes ago that will intervene in various stages of a project. And we're going to explore together how that came to be, what are the opportunities to cooperate, and we'll also hear the investment banking side of how they see that as an actor and what role do they play with this sophisticated ecosystem. So let's get into it then. I guess my first question to our fellow panelists, and Paul, I think I'll direct it to you. I mean, you're a mining engineer by trade. You've been in the business for a long time. You worked in mines. You were CEO of a gold company that had an active mine. You've been in the investment banking side, and now today you're CEO of CDEX, which is a fund that is active on the exploration side. So how do you explain that how did we build this type of ecosystem over the years in Quebec? How did we get here? What's your assessment? You're on mute, Paul. That's a classic. You're on mute.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks for the question. It's an interesting one, and it's one that I've actually lived with for my entire sort of 30-year career. To say that mining is important in Quebec and that we have good rocks here and that we have a talented mining workforce is true, but that's true for Ontario, it's true for BC, it's true for Saskatchewan, blah, blah, blah. So why in Quebec did we, develop this financial infrastructure that we have, like you say, ecosystem? Like many things in life, there's really not one single reason, but one reason that I'll sort of highlight is the presence of the Caisse de dépôt, to be honest with you. I mean, the case has been active in mining for my 30 years that I've been in the business, and they developed a talent very early on of staffing up an important mining team in the case. And it was with not just financial people, but people with geology backgrounds, mining backgrounds. When I came into the business, 89, 90, whatever, in Montreal in the financial business, I worked for Lévesque Beaubien as a mining analyst, but I was being paid by the Caisse. I mean, the Caisse had a program where you could be an analyst in a Montreal office with a technical background, and the Caisse would pay a big portion of your salary. So that's how it started. The Caisse has been an incubator and a school for many people who went on to work for other Quebec institutions, other investment banks. So it's kind of unique. And from that sort of blossomed our current ecosystem, in my opinion. And I'll tell you a little anecdote. Even before I got into this business, back in the mid 80s, the Caisse had a mining team, and they identified an up and coming company, which was called American Barrick. American Barrick, it was just a junior, almost promote, by Peter Monk and Bob Smith. And back then it was just like a heap leach operation in Nevada. And, they studied it, and this is the Caisse de dépôt in Montreal. I mean, they studied this and took on a big position in American Barrick. And American Barrick went on to become Barrick. They went through the Betsy development plan. They became the darling of the stock market. And if I remember looking through the proxy materials, the biggest shareholder of American Barrick back then was Horsham, which was Peter Monk's vehicle. But the second biggest shareholder was the Caisse de dépôt, 16%. So that speaks volumes how a Quebec pension plan could study a mining situation by a geologist. His name will go nameless now, but and they took on a big position. And so from there, they've always maintained a strong mining team. And you had people everywhere from Peter Monk to Bob Freeland to all these guys coming to Montreal. They always came to visit the Caisse de dépôt because they were such an important firm, and just that committed big capital to mining. And when these managements came to Montreal, of course, they'd visit everybody else, but they came to see the Caisse. So it's not the only reason why Quebec created this current ecosystem that we have, but it's a darn big one in my opinion. And it kind of grew from there. And from the Caisse, you had the phone, you had Investissement Québec, and all of the smaller players developing this culture, I guess, and commitment to mining. So that's my take on it, Frank. I mean, I've lived it too. I mean, I worked 10 years, not directly for the Caisse, but for Caisse sponsored mining funds. Sentient was one of them. Inquest was one of them. And without the Caisse, we wouldn't have had a private equity business in Quebec. And so, yeah, very interesting. And so, other provinces have, provincial pension funds, but they don't have the sectorial expertise that the Caisse does in mining. So I would say Quebec is different in that respect.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Listen, in my eagerness to get the debate going, I forgot an important part was to actually have each of you, talk about your respective organizations that you represent here today, and then we would get into the questions. So apologies for that, but you know what we'll do? I think we're going to keep on with that answer. And Paul, you'll have an opportunity later on, I think, to present CDEX in one of the questions that I have for you. But maybe I'll turn it over to Amio, to go on Paul's comments. And, you know, obviously IQ is a major player. Maybe you could start a bit by talking about your fund and then continue on with the conversation. Serge, I'll turn it over to you after. And then Angelina, we could talk about the Laurentian Bank. Amio?
Well, yeah, thank you very much, Frank, and thanks, Paul, for your answer. I guess it's a good segue to introduce IQ. Thank you for Fasken for having us today and giving us the opportunity to present Investissement Québec. So Investissement Québec is a government-owned entity. It's an economic development agency that has two major roles. I guess that there's a role is on the international side, and as well we play the role of the financial arm of the government of Quebec. So to fulfill our role, I think we have 12 offices abroad from the IQ International Division. The International Division's role is to attract foreign direct investment and as well to support Quebec companies for export. On the financial arm of the government of Quebec, we have a number of offices in Quebec, of course, and we have close to 1,000 employees. So for us, I guess we can support companies, startup we have a number of funds that support startup companies, and we can support projects up to operations as well. Overall, Investissement Québec manages $12 billion in support for local businesses. And specifically for the mining industry, it's Ressources Québec, the division for which I work. We manages $1.6 billion. We can invest in debt and equity from a pre-economic assessment up to construction and operation. As well, to support the exploration sector, we have SOCAM, our subsidiary, which manages a budget of $15 million annually, and that supports projects in the strategic and critical minerals, and as well in traditional minerals. So about half of the budget is allocated to the two sectors. So I guess that sums it up at this point, but I'll be happy to answer any questions that the attendants may have. Thank you. Thanks,
Amio. So what's your assessment in terms of Paul said obviously the case has played a big role in terms of IQ and how do you think that all this came to be, that we got this ecosystem now? I mean, you intervene in specific spaces, and we'll touch upon that a bit later. But I mean, this is something that's developed over the last 30 or 40 years, with IQ being a major player. What's your assessment on why this came to be?
Well, I guess the governments and previous governments, whatever the color, have always been supportive of the mining industry. So, I was talking about SOCAM earlier. SOCAM was founded in the 1960s. So it's been around for more than 60 years. And I guess at that point, during the Industrial Revolution in Quebec, I think the governments at that time wanted to Quebec to play a bigger part in the mining industry and to develop I guess the expertise here in Quebec, and you know, for older geologists and some mining engineers. I think most of them worked part of their time or their work life with SOCAM, And today, at that point, SOCAM initially supported exploration projects, but as well, they developed them and operated them. And in 1996, I guess the government wanted to change a little bit the strategy of SOCAM, and they did a spin-off of some of their properties, which became the Cambiar. So, and now Cambiar at that time had a big expertise, and it went through it. I guess, like I said, the expertise in Quebec is now available and internationally recognized. So a lot of Quebecers are working all across the world today, and so I think that was the purpose at that time, and I think it was very beneficial for the industry and Quebecers in mining.
That's a very interesting point about SOCAM. I think we have a tendency to forget that. It's played a big role in Quebec, and obviously, as you know, was the result that created Cambior, that was after that purchased by IAMGOLD, I think in 2006. And Cambior and SOCAM to this day is still a very active player, and apparently a very, very good partner to have with very good expertise on projects. But thanks, Amiot. That's very interesting. So obviously we have the case EQ with and the creation of SOCAM, which is an exploration arm that helped kind of create this ecosystem. Let's turn it over to Serge now. Serge is the Director of Investments in the mining space for le Fonds de solidarité des travailleurs du Québec. So that's another interesting piece of the puzzle of the Fonds FTQ's involvement, how it came to be as well. So Serge, why don't you talk about the Fonds, introduce the Fonds to our audience, and then maybe I'd love to hear your take on how this ecosystem came to be today.
Yes, thanks, Frank, and hello everybody on the line. So the Fonds is quite an interesting entity. It was created in 1983 by an initiative of the FTQ, and sorry, the FTQ, as you may know, is the largest central labor body in Quebec. So it was something very, very innovative at the time. Our mission. We are a development capital fund, and we manage the savings of people from Quebec mainly. And this money that they put into our fund is for their retirement purposes mainly. In that regard, part of our mission is to help people in Quebec to achieve a part of their financial goals. That was one part of the mission. But to achieve that goal, we put that money to work. So our main objective is to take the money invested by those shareholders, and we invest it in businesses in all spheres of activities in Quebec, not only mining, but every spheres of activities. So that allows us to achieve another part of our mission, which is to contribute to Quebec's economic growth by creating and maintaining good jobs through our investments in businesses. The Fonds, as at November 30, 2020, the last time we reported our numbers, we had assets that stands at $15.6 billion. We have over 700,000 shareholders, and they all live in Quebec, like I said. And we are partnered with more than 3,000 companies that we have direct investment in, not public companies, but really private companies based mainly in Quebec. We have more than 700 people working for us in our head office in Montreal, and we are present in all Quebec's region through the regional funds who also invest in the Quebec economy. So for the mining sector, more specifically, we are present at all stage of the sector. We do exploration company, development company, and also producers. We also do stream companies. We also invest in private companies involved in the mining sector. Let's say drilling companies, manufacturers of drilling parts, services companies, and those type of entities. All our events all the companies where we are involved are public. We don't put the numbers, but we put their names. So all those names are available on our websites. We have been present in this sector for more than 30 years right now. And we were there independent of all the cycles. We were there when it was bad and also when it's good. We invest every year in the sector. mainly in exploration companies. When the times are tough, Frank, we want to be supportive, because one of our role, like I said, is to support the Quebec the industry. So what we do is we do mainly equity financing in the sector, and we also do loan, but we don't do secured financing. We are a non-secured borrower. So the team, there's me, as you know, Danny Pelletier, who probably a few person on the call, on the line, sorry, probably know. He has been involved in the sector for more than 25 years. He worked at the CAIS too, so he is a well-known figure in the mining sector. And we are, when I do investment, I am helped by a multi-specialist team to do my investment. We do our legal or taxation studies internally, and now in the recent year we added a new department, which is the ESG one, and we'll talk about this probably later. So. And about my portfolio, I am invested the fund in about 40 public companies, and we have a lot of private companies involved in the sector. So I think that's about it for us. And now, for the other part of the first question that you asked, Frank, well, let's start by saying that there's a big mining tradition in Quebec. We have all those great institutions, and the CAIS is really one of them. But at first, you have to have mines, buddy. You have to have mines. And I come from Rouen-Noranda, and as you may know, the Noranda mine was built here. Was not built here, but the mine was located here, and it gave birth to Noranda Inc., which became one of the largest companies in the world at the time. So there's a big mining tradition, especially in the regions of Quebec, let's say the Abitibi region, and so also the north and the Côte-Nord, which has iron mines there. But at first, you need to have mines, and I think that Quebec offers a lot of opportunities, and it still does. The territoire, or the Quebec has a lot of grounds not yet well explored. You know, when you look at maps, you see that a lot of historical work have been done on the Abitibi region, a little bit in the north of Quebec, but most of the Quebec right now is not very. There have been not a lot of exploration expenditure. So I think that first, the mining tradition maybe explains the attraction of people from the industry, and then of course, when you have a big industry that is contributing to the economy, you will have institutions like the CAIS, like the Fond, like the government that will want to be supportive of those industry and try to invest in it and make sure that it continues to grow and it has an environment where we can develop our suppliers, our manufacturers, but also have good jobs that benefits to Quebec. And you have to have people that likes the sector to contribute in it. And let's say SIDEX, Paul, is, as you know, was created by the Fond and by the government in 2001. And the idea was that at the time, the price of gold was down. It was tough in Quebec, and there was a lack of exploration expenditure at the time. And SIDEX was created with the goal to attract investment in Quebec, to support exploration, to support new ideas, to diversify the territories, to look for new commodities. And in that regard, I think that the goal then was clearly achieved. As you know, Frank, you haven't told it, but you are on the board of SIDEX also, and you have seen what SIDEX has done so far. So it's a great entity, and it has been very supportive. So, but it started with the interest and the motivation of people like Gaëtan Morin at the time to do something meaningful for the province of Quebec. So I think that in the end, we all have a desire, and we all like the sector. I'm pretty sure that if you ask us why we work in the mining sector, we will have different stories, but I think we all like it. It's like I told you, I come from the mining region. I'm based in the Rouen-Noranda, and my father worked in the mining sector, and I grew around the mine, so it's in my let's say my vein. So I think that there's a lot of people like that in Quebec. The government, Amio told told it, but they have been very supportive also to put in place really good tax incentives through the times. Let's say the flow-through system, the REA in the late 80s, which was another vehicle that supported the industry. So all those tax incentives created an environment where investor could come here and put money at very lower cost sometimes than other jurisdictions. So that maybe explains a little bit of our success. And I'll stop there. I know that you have other questions.
Lots to talk about. Well,
yeah, sorry.
Thanks, Serge. I mean, so far we've seen, Paul gave his assessment, talked about La Caisse. He'll have an opportunity also to talk about the fund that he manages. Amiot, you talked about Investissement Québec, which is a government investment arm. The case was created in the 60s, I think, which played a big role. Interesting, Serge. I mean, the largest union in the province, which creates a fund to invest in various businesses, and then actually actively supports mining, either on the startup side, on the exploration, which is a very risky part of investment. Amiot, again, can understate your intervention regarding SOCAM, the exploration arm of the government, which had tremendous success. So I'll turn it over now to Angelina, because I asked Angelina to intervene from the investment banker's perspective, right? And because obviously, you're coming in, you're an investment banker, and then you see all these institutions that have funds allocated to support mining. You also, it's part of your business. You want to support mining, you want to play a role. So Angelina, why don't you talk to us about, talk about Banque Laurentienne, Laurentian Bank, what it's done, but maybe also from your perspective, from an investment banking side, how did this ecosystem, how do you view this ecosystem, and what did it represent for you and your business?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me here. It's great to be on this panel, and hopefully I can add to some of the conversations we're having here about in Quebec. Yes, I am an investment banker currently. I do have a history of working in the industry over 20 years as well. So I have worked directly for mining companies in private equity and on boards in Quebec as well. So hopefully I can contribute from several levels here. But a few words about Laurentian Bank. It is a fully integrated financial services provider. It was founded in Montreal, in Quebec, so a Quebec bank through and through. I wrote down the year so I wouldn't forget. 1846, founded here, and is currently the 7th largest Canadian chartered bank. 2 years ago, myself and my partner Joe Gallucci decided to launch an investment banking team specifically for mining with Laurentian, and I'll get into some of the reasons of that shortly. But just so we add some color to what LBS does, it is a full service broker dealer. Our team has corporate finance experience, so we can provide advisory for M&A, financing, etc. And I'll give you a couple of numbers later on in terms of what we've been able to achieve in the last couple of years. But what we saw was an opportunity in Quebec. Essentially, we wanted to leverage the balance sheet of a Schedule I bank in order to do bond deals, for example, here. Because we are a small team within a bank, we can be entrepreneurial. We have some flexibility, and we can be responsive to a certain extent. And I have some numbers later that I want to share with you with respect to the market or the context in Quebec, which helped us determine that we wanted to set up this team. But we also wanted to complement the mining analysts that we had in Toronto when we set up our team, and to be very focused about the coverage in terms of where we could be impactful, and that happened to be on a certain size company based in this province. As of today, we are the only mining investment banking team based in Montreal and focused on Quebec. Certainly some of the bigger banks have employees here, but not a fully dedicated team. We also wanted to position ourselves as we looked around the ecosystem in investment banking in Quebec. We wanted to position ourselves as a bridge for Quebec companies to use our networks, Joe's and mine, that we had gathered over the years outside the province and internationally for Quebec mining companies for marketing, for financing, and M&A opportunities. And conversely, we wanted to position ourselves to be able to bring in management teams and expertise and capital from outside of Quebec to take advantage of this particular jurisdiction. And we can talk about some examples later, particularly hot right now, or Australian interest in Quebec. Also, a core focus of our team has been to increase the dialogue and the transparency between issuers and the Quebec funds. So when we started, and I'm sure all of you will remember, or Paul, it was before your time at CDAX, but Serge will, Stefan will remember at CASE, when we launched our team, we sat down with each one of you and we said, what are your top 10 priorities in terms of issuers, in terms of your alignment and your goals? Because as a bank, we can help amplify that or execute that in different ways than you can as funds. So it was our absolute mission to interact positively with you guys and to help articulate or action some of the deals that we want that you guys are also involved in. So I think that I'll leave it there. I did want to say quickly in terms of numbers, since we started, we've actually completed 81 financings, most of them in Quebec. Serge mentioned flow through, very big topic, I think, frankly. Out of the 81 deals, 47 of them for us have been flow through. Throw some numbers out there too, almost 200 million in flow through just through Laurentian Bank. So imagine what everybody else is doing across Canada, but more specifically Quebec. From a hard dollar perspective, we've been participating or leading 34 deals, totaling just over 900 million. So from a little team that set up just 2 years ago, literally April 1st is our anniversary for 2 years, we've actually managed to do a lot of business here. And one of our objectives also, which I know that we've heard a lot through our conversations with the funds, is maybe to help encourage consolidation as well. We talked about the different regions in Quebec. We also talked about the number of players that are here. So if that's a mandate or an objective for the funds in terms of investing into bigger entities, I think that would be fantastic and a way for us to also help concretely. And finally, maybe I'll mention, as a bank, we can help with the objective of getting to the next Quebec producer. We have a couple of stars in Quebec. We talked about gold and iron ore. Champion is a champion in Quebec. However, not all of our gold producers are actually based here. And we lost Semifo in the last 6 months or so to an international takeover. So while the history or the origins are in Quebec, who's the next producer based in Quebec? And so absolutely that would be a goal of Laurentian Bank to make that happen. But maybe if I switch to trying to answer your specific question, how does this happen and how does it come to be? Just to add to what the guys have already talked about in terms of the origin of the ecosystem, I think it is a bit of a self-fulfilling situation where obviously the rocks were good, the mines were built, it drew the investment, and then you can't forget the infrastructure. The infrastructure as a consequence of these mines, right? The roads that we have, the power, the hydropower that we have, the access to water, the labor force that we have, all of it is self-fulfilling. It is a big loop. We have the expertise here. Sixth on the Fraser's list. I always think we should be higher, and I have no idea, how we're going to get up that list in terms of external perception. But hopefully, panels like this, where we can specifically talk about the government support, the policies that are in place, and the infrastructure that we have, next year we'll be higher on that list. So maybe I'll leave it there, Frank.
Well, that's interesting. Obviously, you said we have it's almost like a build it and they will come scenario, right? So it's. Yeah, well, thanks, Angelina. Very insightful. But let's just explore that a bit more before we move on to the other question, because we all talked about government initiatives, government measures. So for our international audience listening to us, I guess who one of the objectives is if you want to do something like this in your jurisdiction, I guess one of the key ingredients is having government support and government action to be able to allow such an ecosystem to be built. And maybe Paul, I wouldn't mind you've been the CEO of a mining of a gold producer. You've seen how important is that government support for our industry and building this and creating this ecosystem? Probably an obvious answer, but
Yeah, no, it is an obvious. It's very important. Building a mine is becoming increasingly challenging, no matter where you are in the world, right? And sort of the whole supply is being sort of pinched off because we've got the sort of the not in my backyard scenario. So if you don't have government support in all forms, it becomes very, very difficult to establish an industry. And we're lucky to have it in Quebec. And I would say it's as strong now as it's ever been. The government that's in power now is very eager to keep the oxygen coming to the mining industry, and I would say the future looks bright for us. We have to just keep, because the low-hanging fruit is gone. We have to keep our shoulder to the wheel and keep exploring and keep producing, keep developing talent, all the things that are necessary, for a thriving mining industry. I think we're doing, but we have to not let our guard down.
Yeah, it's interesting. Anybody else want to intervene? No specific order in terms of the importance of the government support. Amiu?
Yeah, I may had a. Well, I think when I started in this industry, I think that the cost of capital to build a mine were much lower than today. Today, under $500 to $1 billion, it's difficult to start a mine. And the financial markets are cyclical, as we all know. So having support from the government or institutions like the Fonds de Solidarité, la Caisse, SIDEX, I think it's utmost important. When we talk to promoters of projects here in Quebec, they feel lucky. Some are based abroad, outside of Quebec, or in other countries. And they definitely like having the government support their projects, and for most cases it helps them. I would say today, I guess financing a gold project's probably easier than a year ago or 2 years ago, but in industrial minerals, it's much more different story. Yes, there's some cycles, but just the nature of the minerals, it's by themselves, it's difficult. For having the government support is I think utmost important for these projects, and for us just to I guess for us at IQ, we can support any project in any mineral. Let's say if we take uranium apart, which doesn't have much social acceptance here, but any projects in mining in Quebec, as long as the deposit is in Quebec, Investissement Québec is here to support the project, as long as it makes sense on a business-wise.
Interesting one. Angelina, you did mention flow through, right? And flow through is a government measure. The Quebec has taken it to the extra level, to what we call super flow through. This has been existing for many, many years now. So I presume, probably goes without saying, but I presume having a measure like that, you did mention the flow through that you've helped raise for your clients. I presume it makes it that much easier to do these financings if you're doing it for a Quebec company with all these incentives, rather than doing it for somewhere else in another jurisdiction in Canada.
Completely, Frank. The ability to have even several different types of vehicles within one financing makes it attractive, right? Because you have the funds with the hard dollars, but then you could have the charity flow through as well. I know that's a Canadian thing, not specific to Quebec, but that's been what's really attracting a lot of foreign funds, especially Australians, who have really latched onto this and understanding that they could get 1.8 of an investment into the ground. Very attractive. We on our team have a dedicated person, Tom Nicolatopoulos on our team, who only does flow through. So this guy is an expert. He knows the flow through funds. In fact, Laurentian Bank helps finance the flow through funds, which then turn around and invest into these companies. So I think it's it's another little mini ecosystem within the greater ecosystem, the whole flow through market, but absolutely one of our strengths.
Thanks, Angelina.
Frank, if I can add something on that, because you talk about flow through shares, and it's a very important part of the way company in the exploration sector finance their work. But that's where funds like us, SIDEX, the Caisse de dépôt, and other institutions in Quebec have a part to play, because we only do our dollars. I thought you mentioned it, but we really have to focus on the fact that our fund invest in our dollars, and they are sometimes the harder dollar to find, because the investors, we don't get any tax return, tax incentive for doing the investment. So, and we pay, not we pay, but those financing in our dollar pays for the salaries, the general and administrative expense, and it's not money going on the ground. So companies in exploration and development stage needs to have our dollar, and that's where we can do leverage, because if all the institution will like a company or a project and we invest in it, we will provide only hard dollars, and that can be leveraged into flow-through financing that the company can do and raise on the markets, and then go that money has to go on the ground. So I think that's a way, not a way, but that's how we can we leverage the flow-through financing through our investment, I think.
That's a very good point, I think, in having a sound ecosystem with aggressive tax incentives for private investment, and then the funds can come in and fill a gap, which is on the hard dollars for the regular budget and regular expenses. So why don't we move on to our next question? And Amio, this one's directed to you a bit, although I think everyone, I would like to know what everyone thinks. You know, there's no organized cooperation between the funds. You don't have that. You don't. But it's really funny how, you know, over the years in this ecosystem, you know, even though you all have your own missions and investment objectives, there's kind of a natural cooperation that comes on, where you will intervene, each of you, at these different levels and different stages of the project. So obviously, you know, how do you suppose that ecosystem allows for the funds to work and to cooperate with one another in supporting the projects in Quebec, Amio?
Well, yes, I think you've heard, I guess, the presentations of the different funds, and we all have our different mandates, as you mentioned, and different field of intervention. But at the end of the day, I think we have objectives that are common. I think we all want to develop the seed industry, the mining industry being developed in Quebec. We all want to keep more expertise in Quebec. We want new mines to be in operations over the long term, and we all want to realize a return on our investment. So I think for us, and we've known each other for many years, all of us. So it's we know most of the projects were, you know, for us, we invest at the PEA level and later stage, but CDEX and the fund and even the caisse support exploration projects. But with all these different mandates, and we're kind of we cooperate together, and we're kind of complementary. As I said earlier, to develop build mines, it costs a lot. First, to find mines is a lot of money that has to be invested in the exploration. Through SOCAM, we do our own part, but there's some projects that SOCAM is involved with companies that are financed by the fund and Serge and CDEX and PA and Angelina as well. So and these projects, when they grow, then IQ can come and complete the financial package that other institutions cannot. So I guess at this point, it's natural to collaborate, cooperate, and support these projects.
Anybody want to take a crack at that one, Serge? Go ahead.
Well, you know, Amio have put it very clear and well think, but you know, when you look at exploration companies, well, we cooperate. We do sometimes find the same financing. We support a lot of companies in CDEX, at the fund, at the CDQ, which are the same companies, but we don't do it necessarily for the same reason always. But I think I'm used to that we are sometimes complementary, but it's important also to keep our own our own, let's say, thesis of investment. We don't like all the same commodities at the same levels. We don't like the same the promoters at the same levels. Some CDEX will like CDPQ, maybe not, or the contrary. But so I think we have to keep our own mandate separate, but we gain to share our expertise, to exchange on ideas on how to promote the industry. What are our takes? I like to. It's fun. It's important for me to know what Amio thinks about certain commodities and what Stéphane Decazes thinks about some, and Paul. But doesn't mean that if because we share that we'll at the end have the same idea. But at least I'll know where everybody stands, and I have a good idea if a company goes into financing with certain project. Well, I think, but probably CDEX will like it, and probably Stéphane will like it, or but so at exploration stages, the needs, the financial needs are so high and constant that we're not in competition. So I don't see Stéphane, CDEX, or anybody else in competition at the exploration stage, because we all know the process. It takes time, it takes a lot of money and a lot of knowledge to find a mine, to build it. So there will be space for every investor at every stages of the process, of the financing process. And of course, when you go through development and production, well, we have mandate of supporting the Quebec economy, but we don't do the same products. I don't do secured financing. Amio can do it. Stéphane Decazes can. So we won't be in competition, but we won't bid or try to do the same products sometimes. So we work together, but we are also competitors sometimes. But it's always done in good faith and with respect to each other organization, I think.
Mm-hmm. Amio used the word that I like very much. It's an easy word, but he said complementary. So I mean, all these different actors are in there, and they're complementary to one another because of their mission. There's no coercion, or there's no it's just complementary, right? I presume, Angelina, from your perspective as an investment banker, when you look at all these funds and the fact that they're complementary, but all obviously have different mission objectives. You talked about speaking to every one of them. I presume you factor that in when you have a financing going and you're going to need to approach these various funds, right?
No, exactly. And that's one of the areas where I think we've been helpful, and please guys, let me know if it hasn't been, but certainly the multitude of Quebec companies that have been around for a long time already have existing relationships with the funds. So to, insert ourselves in to try to add value, how does that work? And really the point is that we can have conversations with you directly that they can't, or that they don't, or in conjunction with other financings or other companies that we're talking to. So for us, it's not a matter of I'll call Paul only when there's a financing. It's, hey, Paul, what's the update? Let's talk every couple of weeks. Same thing, Amio and Serge, and with Stéphane and with ST Bay James. We didn't talk about the Société Développement Bay James, but they're also a group that we talk regularly with in terms of who are we seeing, what are we seeing, what are the stories that that we're actually covering on our coverage list, or that we've now just newly put on our watch list. So these are constant conversations, as opposed to I'm just going to hit you up for financing when it's needed. And I think that enhances the dialogue right across the board. Please agree with me, guys.
We agree with you, Angie.
So Paul, let's move it over to you now. I think obviously there's a question, when considering how such an ecosystem came to be. And one of the things we talked about is, well, there has to be mines, right? There has to be mines in Quebec, but to have mines in Quebec, there obviously has to be exploration. So maybe, maybe it's a good time for you to introduce CDEX and what it does, and then to address the following question, in your opinion, to have an ecosystem like that, how fundamental and important is it to have, investment initiatives that support exploration?
Okay, well, yeah, it's fine. It's obviously very key, because if you don't have the discoveries, it's eventually it's going to run dry, right? But let me take a step back and introduce CDEX. It's as the guys were saying, it's this very cool initiative that was put forth about 20 years ago by Serge's colleagues at the Fonds de Solidarité and the Quebec government. And they realized back then that, in order to have a healthy mining industry, we have to take care of the very front end. I mean, we have to make sure that the drills are turning, and that there's exploration being done, and basically, if that's not taken care of, well, you're going to run out of mines to develop. And sometimes to fund exploration companies, it's not always that easy, because it's a high risk end of the spectrum, and if you run into bear markets, they're hard to finance. And what one of the purposes CDEX was formed was to introduce an institutional player in the exploration game, because really mostly it's a retail game, exploration, right? And it's hard to raise any kind of serious money for exploration companies on a retail basis. So what basically CDEX was the introduction of an institutional exploration player, which was kind of novel back then. Kind of still is, really, because often most investment funds get a little afraid of that's the end of the spectrum, right? They like to look at things when a resource starts to develop, because it's de-risked. Well, with CDEX, that's pretty much too late for us. We're at the very front end of things, and so we're not afraid to listen to geophysical programs and till anomalies surveys, and this is the kind of stuff where we like, but it's not the kind of things that are necessarily easily financed for the companies. So we had to provide that oxygen for those companies. So to say that 20 years later we not only did that, but we provided a return, a pretty significant return, really. I mean, we almost tripled our assets, to our limited partners, the FOA and the government. But we also, fulfill the other mandate. The dual part of our mandate is that we did provide significant funding for these exploration companies. Which, again, I mean, you name me another place in the planet that has a vehicle like that. I don't think there's one. Might be mistaken, but so CDEX in the last 20 years has funded about 150 exploration companies. They've deployed about $100 million in high risk plays, and we continue to do it, and we're a very sympathetic door to knock on for exploration companies. Obviously, if you're in a roaring bull market, and it's easy to raise capital, but boy, sometimes it gets a little tough out there. And companies, but we, good years and bad, we've got our budget, and like this year, we'll probably invest in 25 companies, and that's a pretty good run rate to use going forward. So it's a unique little vehicle, and as Amiu says, it's very complementary to the other pillars of our Quebec society in our mining ecosystem. So yeah, it's again when you add all the elements up, what Amiu does, what Stéphane does at the case, what Serge does at the phone, and what some of the smaller players done, what we do, I don't think there's another place on the planet that has what we have for the mining industry. And so I agree with Angie. We should be like number one on the Fraser Institute. We used to be, I think, or two.
2007, we're number one.
So ahead. We'll get back to the top spot, but it's not about a beauty contest, really. It's just about doing all the right things. And
let's not forget, we made it down to the 21st spot.
Oh, did we?
And now we've made our way back to 6.
We clawed our way back. Exactly.
We're getting back.
Exactly. So really, that's CDEX in a nutshell. But I like the comment that Amiu brought up as well. Like, I've known Amiu for 25 years. I've known Serge a long time. Stéphane, we all know each other. We all respect each other, and we all talk a lot. We all share our views. And it's just a very cool little fraternity we have here in Quebec, and we have significant funds behind it as well. You know,
well, we won't
so
show
it's-
them our secret handshake, though, right?
Yeah,
We
yeah,
won't
yeah.
show-
That's
we won't
right.
show them that.
That's right.
But Paul, if I can bring you to the maybe we're talking about the importance to support exploration. And obviously you talked a bit about it. One of the mission too is diversification, right? We talked about 21 active mines in Quebec, 8 of which are gold mines, right?
Mhm.
And then we got the nickel, we got that. So, you know, talk about diversification too from your perspective and the
Mhm.
importance for the future mines that
Yeah.
we're.
Yeah, well, diversification in 2 areas, right? Commodity, you're right. I mean, we're gold heavy here. We want to see more nickel and copper plays, and eventually more, you know, specialty metals and strategic metals. And we've got a whole, you know, a whole spectrum of commodities in Quebec. You know, so yeah, diversification from a commodity aspect is important, but also diversification from, you know, a geological context, you know, is very important. So what we're doing more and more with CDEX is we're favoring, you know, actually we always have done this, but I would say it's more prevalent now than it's ever been. And we're trying to get beyond the beaten tracks of the Archean setting, you know, greenstone belts in the Archean setting, but we're investing now in Grenville situations and other sub-provinces in Quebec to try to get away from the, you know, the path of least resistance. Let's go to the easy geological context. Let's try to diversify away from that. So I would say it's a very important theme that we're playing with right now. I mean, Frank, you're our chairman at CDEX, but I think the last 4 of our 5 investments have been done in geological contexts that are kind of in a diversification standpoint. So let's try to expand our horizons. Let's try to use innovative, you know, exploration techniques to understand the different rocks and the different settings. And so it's I would say it's probably the biggest theme that we're dealing with right now, and I think it will continue.
Thanks, Paul. Serge, I mean, let's talk about the fund, right? Because the fund is a fund that supports exploration. You know, as Paul mentioned, it's a risky investment, but you also have your objectives as well, right? As a fund, you're not there to lose money necessarily, but maybe your take on you've talked about it a bit since the beginning about the importance of exploration and how the support.
Well, it is important to support exploration. With no exploration, there's no future mines. So every 2, 3, 4 years, somebody at the fund asks us, why do you still do small tickets compared to our overall annual budget? We invest between 800 million to 1 billion in the Quebec economy. So as you know, in the exploration finance, when we do exploration financing, we do small rounds. We put $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. So it doesn't move a lot on the big picture of our fund. But we always say that it is important for us to support this ecosystem, because we have to have a wide range of explorers in Quebec that have access to money, that brings new idea, that as Paul said, will go to try to explore new sector, new area. Well, the Grenville, Paul, it's interesting what you say about the Grenville. There's a renewed interest for this province right now, I think, and it's fun to have. It's a good thing to have CDEX supported it, but we also are present there, and if it can open new area of exploration, I think we play a role. And then by doing that, we support the benefit. The benefit is to support the private sector, because drillers will work, workers in Quebec will have to do field work. We haven't talked about geophysics so far, but exploration companies are a good lab for geophysics projects. So it's very important. And when we develop in Quebec those expertise, we can export them, because we're not in competition between ourselves. I think the wild world is our competition, and we have to be very, very sharp at the beginning of the process. And I see the exploration companies very important in this process.
Thanks, Serge. Amio or Angelina, before we move on to the other, I know Amio, you, like you said, you intervene more at the PEA stage and after. So we're talking about maybe a more advanced, or Angelina, if there's something you want to, before we move on to our next question in terms of exploration and the importance to have support and investment initiatives for exploration.
No, I think that was one of the reasons we positioned ourselves here in Quebec, Frank. And maybe the next question, I'll talk a little bit more about context, but we talked about our producing mines. The number of, development companies is very, very low. It's all very heavily weighted on the exploration side. So how do we give them the appropriate attention in conjunction with what the funds are already doing? And that's kind of why we set up shop here.
Yeah, maybe one quick comment, I guess. Well, CDEX is a product of the fund and the government, so that the government's playing a role in that sense. But as well, like I mentioned earlier, SOCAM has a $15 million budget for exploration, yearly budget for exploration. So that's the way the government decided to support projects. But for Ressources Québec, I guess it's a later stage. We come in after. And we can invest, just to give you a highlight, we can invest from $1 million up to several $100 million. Just recently in December, with a private equity fund and the strategic partners, we bought the assets of Nemaska Lithium to develop this project. And in that transaction, the government expressed intention to invest up to $300 million. So I guess that gives you a way how we can be complementary as well.
That's interesting. You mentioned you intervene at a different level, but you do have an exploration arm with SOCAM, who actually is also a joint venture partner with other exploration companies and contributes to support of exploration. That's another thing that I think is unique that we have in our ecosystem. Let's move on. I've started getting some questions that we'll address a bit later, but these ones that I just got, we may be able to fold them into this next question that I'm directing to Serge. And maybe just a reminder for the audience, if you want to send me your questions, we're going to have a 10 to 15 minute Q&A at the end. So, like we talked about, funds, Serge, funds you all invest in different stages. So what are the key drivers, for these decisions? What are the key drivers, the investment criteria when you make such a decision? And I've received some questions in terms of measuring of the risk factors. And obviously, Serge, you talked about at the beginning, what about ESG? Does that form part of your key drivers and your investment criteria? So if you could give us a bit of insight on that, Serge.
I'll try to be quick, Frank, but it's a big question. So of course we have our process, and every fund, I think, has his own process and his own way to analyze and quantify the risk of investing in those companies. But I will say it's a cliche, but it's the first criteria. With who are we investing? Who's the president? Who's the VP Explo? Who's on the board? So we of course look at track records. That's the easy question. We always have to have faith in the people that we invest money in. We look at their ability and their track record, when they have one, of how they manage their old project if they were in other companies, and were they able to bring capital to raise enough equity to advance those projects. So that's one criteria. The other, of course, in exploration, we always look at commodities. Every year, we do a few times a year a review. We do it internally. Of course, we use outside research, but we have our own people, and we take position on the commodities that we like, and of course the one that we are more careful with. So we take a position on every commodity. So sometimes a company, an exploration company, will approach us and I say, sorry, but I can't do for X reason, and I won't go in details, but we take a position on that. Of course, locations. We all have thesis, but an easy one. I'm with the fund for almost 8 years now, and when I came in, I always liked the Val-d'Or Cap. That's an easy one. That's an easy call to make today. But in 2013, 14, don't know if you remember, there were more players. Integral had not yet founded its mine, and the camp was more fragmented. So I decided at the time to take position in all the companies. So regardless of not regardless, but we have put money in almost all of them, and it paid off because the area was good and we had a long-term thesis. So we take position and we have idea about where we want to be, where we don't want to be. Of course, when we talk about exploration at the grassroots stages, we know that they won't be on the Cadillac break. So they will have to go more north or in the Grenville. So we'll look at the thesis, how they manage exploration, how they generate projects. And we know that if we decide to support one, we are there not only for one round, but for subsequent round. It's a long-term process, as we say. Governance, I won't put too much emphasis on this, but it's very important. More at later stage. At exploration stage, it's hard for a company to bring a big, wide, diversified board with a lot of members. So we know it's hard to attract people. Sometimes they only get paid through their stock options. They don't have big salary there. So, but at development stage, it's really important to have the good boards, and maybe we should insist more on that in the future on that point. Especially when a company goes from exploration to development, it's not the same people that find a mine and that builds it. So sometimes, of course, we look at those team, and sometimes we put comments and we say we don't. Not that we don't like the team, but I think you should add people. We will intervene there. You mentioned, and I will stop that, ESG. And Angelina, the first time we met, you asked me a question: how was ESG important for us? I remember what I told you at the time. It was about 2 years ago, and my answer today would be a little bit different. It was important at the time, but now it's really, really important. And institutions like us starts to have our own person that work for us that are specialized in ESG matter. So if we do a substantial investment in a mining company, we will go through the process of reviewing all their ESG policies. What are their, of course, the governance, we already did it in the past. We would look at the circular, look at we would do an extensive review of that. But the E and the S is very, very important. And now we have questions coming from our board, and we see more and more studies that shows that companies having good ESG practices should provide better long-term return to the investor. It's now a criteria that was important, but now it really is. Okay. I'll let the other talk now.
Thanks, Serge. Paul or Amio, and your key drivers on the investment criteria?
Well, yeah, for us, I guess we to support a project, we need Serge alluded to it. We need a good management team. I think for us, we're maybe willing to take more risk than some investors, but we still want a return on our investment. And of course, there are some. They must have economic benefits for the province of Quebec. But one thing I think in Quebec, I think I alluded to it earlier, but I think our expertise is sought elsewhere in the world. But and we're good gold miners, but for industrial minerals, it's difficult sometimes to find the expertise. I look at all the battery materials. It was all developed by Asia, so the expertise is mostly in China and in Asia. So for these types of investments, I think we'll look for strategic partners. I think they're important, and mining projects have their own challenges. But when you there's the mining part of it, but then there's the I guess the transformation and conversion. Now you're talking about chemical plants, so miners are not don't necessarily have that expertise. So for us, we're focusing more and more on strategic partners being alongside with us.
From my perspective, Frank, see that, I mean, we're dealing with small companies, so, but it's they still have to tick all the boxes, I mean, we, the plans that they present to us, I mean, they're going to be presenting plans to myself and to, Isabelle Cadieux, my colleague, and André Laferrière. They both have 25 years plus experience in geology, so they know what, they know what they're talking about. So the geological plans have to be well thought out based on sound concepts. And qualified management and board has to be in place, really. Capital structure has to be sound. And and each company we invest in has to have a stated CSR policy. If they don't, they have to commit to have one in place, in 6 months. And so even though they're very small companies, they do have to meet those criteria.
Thanks.
Maybe I'll chime in at the end here, Frank, just because I think we could do an hour and a half on ESG alone, right? I think that from our perspective, the question of impact funding has come up a lot in mining. How can we can't find access to green funds for mining companies? I think there's a few disconnects there. One, in terms of the size of the investment, some of the bigger funds that have green funds are looking for, $100 million or $200 million investments. And the mining companies that we're talking about here are looking for, sometimes a few $100,000 or a few million. So there's a mismatch. And then, also sometimes the tools are debt related or convertible or bonds, and that's not what the mining companies want. But all that being said, is certainly we are having conversations with all of our issuers, not just in Quebec, on ESG. There's an evolution in how ESG is reported, and I think that's an important conversation to have. And everything from your board diversity to the policies that you talk about with respect to your carbon footprint are coming up in conversations. But I'll stop there because we can go on forever.
Yeah, and that's I completely agree. We could talk about that for a very long time. Just about about 10 minutes or so to go before we take some questions. Well, Angelina, I mean, obviously with Laurentian Bank, you financed companies that are in other jurisdictions, either in Canada or elsewhere in the world. So from your perspective, I mean, how do we compare to other jurisdictions in Canada, for example, regarding the support of mining? And if we do it better, why?
So when I was thinking about this question, I broke it down into a couple of pieces. And one again was why are we here? Why did we pick Quebec? And just looking at the numbers again, we did a quick survey, and there's just about 174 public listed companies that have mineral assets in Quebec, at least on the exchanges that we looked at. And of these, 41 of them have a market cap above 100 million. So only 41. So what does that mean? The rest of them are below Bay Street's typical market cap, right? And so 76% of the companies in Quebec are below that. And who are they looking to for support? This is what makes Quebec different, right? They have access to support. And so LBS setting up in Quebec can now use or amplify what the funds are already doing by looking at these companies. I thought that was an important way to set the stage in terms of context here. So that's how we're different. We can support these lower market cap companies in a way that's different than other provinces. Secondly, Amio mentioned this a few times. Quebec came out with a plan at the end of October last year, specifically on critical and strategic minerals. I don't know any other province that has done that. Very specific focus on, say, we want to be a leader, not just at the mineral exploration mining stage, but right through the whole process. So while we are very good at iron ore and gold, and to some extent diamonds, how do we develop a plan to get there for the rest of it? And so as bankers, what we've seen, at least in Quebec, there's a plan. There's funds set aside. It's not as concrete or deep yet in terms of how I can actually fund a graphite company or a lithium or new emerging lithium company, but the conversations have started. So that's what makes Quebec different. We talked about flow through already. Absolutely, the delta on the flow through makes Quebec different. And the fact that the funds are around and supporting makes Quebec different. We talked about SOCAM quite a bit. I think there's been a change in management at SOCAM too, and the story you gave about Cambior, I think that's sort of coming full circle again. When we get calls from foreign investors or foreign management teams saying we'd love to take a toehold in your province, well, where can we go shopping? Well, I've got a shopping list right here at SOCAM, right? So that's what makes Quebec different. So that's my short list.
Well, that's very interesting. I don't know if anybody wants to intervene on that before we move on to our next topic. Serge, yes.
Well, we haven't spoke about it, but in Quebec, there's a big database that is public and available to all companies that was created by the people at the government. It was the Ministère des Ressources, Natural Resources Department, I think, that built the big database. So companies from Australia, Africa, can come in Quebec, access to the data that is available, and they can try to generate IDs from there, and it's available to everybody at no cost. So that's a big tool. I haven't seen that in any other region, I think. And I won't add to what Angelina said, because I think that she provided a lot of. She's already said a lot of the things that are specified and are good in Quebec. But this big data available to everybody, I think, is something very, very interesting in Quebec.
Yeah, that's a very good point from Géologie Québec, and the fact that and I know that's for being involved in various jurisdictions across the world, and having in the course of my work meeting with other governments who are trying to develop their mining platform. Obviously, having this kind of database and making it publicly available is of key importance if you want to attract investment. And it's one of the criteria in the Fraser Institute survey, right? It's one of the criteria that they look at is access to the database. Well, listen, things are moving quickly. We're done in about just about 10-15 minutes. So let's look together at a situation. So let's pretend. Let's pretend that there was no pandemic, and we're actually in Toronto right now, physically assisting PDAC conference. Okay, so let's just explore that option for one. And you're in one of the numerous events, and you have somebody in front of you that's from another jurisdiction, and you talk to them about what you do, and in Quebec and what we've created. And that person says, you know what, I find that very interesting. I'd love to be able to do something like that in my jurisdiction. If you had somebody in front of you who actually asked you that, what would be your top 3 recommendations for any jurisdiction that wants to have this kind of ecosystem? What would be your top 3? So maybe I don't know, Amio, I'll start with you.
Yeah, let's pretend we're at the Fasken cocktail event.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Next year.
No, I guess it would be very important for the jurisdiction to establish what do they want to do with what are the objectives, what do they want to develop, are there specific minerals that they want to develop in their jurisdiction. So establishing the objectives is very important. But one thing, if there's a dedicated envelope to I guess support mining projects in their jurisdictions, I think it's important that it's being managed by experts in the field, and try to as much as possible to avoid political influence. I think from our side, I think that the government has given IQ the mandate to support mining projects, but it's being developed from people that know the mining industry. So I think that's very important. I would say that are my on top of my head the few tips that I would give. So happy to hear my colleagues on this.
Thanks, Paul. Maybe over to you.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. It's a tough question, Frank, because you can put the criteria on paper, right? I mean, we've had calls at CDEX from Ontario and Saskatchewan and BC. We've had calls and say like, how did you guys do it? We'd like to do it. So we're happy to help, right? But I think there has to be a culture there, you know. I mean, there has to be a culture in the province to, or we're talking within Canada, but even if you go internationally, there has to be a real willingness. You asked a question before about governments, the you know, the important role governments play in establishing these entities, and it's crucial, because unless you have a culture that really wants to do this, it's going to be tough. Right. Even I could easily tell Ontario how we set up CDEX, but they don't have a Fonds de solidarité, and they don't necessarily have a government that has a sympathetic ear to it. You know, so there really has to be a concerted effort, you know, at the government level to establish the kind of ecosystem we have. I mean, you brought up an interesting point. I mean, governments change, but you know, our ecosystem has only gotten better. You know, we've only built on what we've created and put the building blocks in place over time, and we're stronger now than we've ever been in terms of, you know, being able to help out the mining industry and create and foster a culture of willingness to have a mining industry. But there's got to be a buy-in, you know, at the government level, and we have it. How do you instill that in other provinces? That's a tough one. I mean, they have to want it themselves too, right?
That's a very interesting point.
Yeah.
Well, Paul kind of stole my line, because the point that I had was to promote a culture of collaboration and to encourage all people of the industry to work together to bring investment, but to also, Amio has said it, what do you have to offer? You have to know what you have to offer at first. And when I say collaboration, you have also to keep in mind that you want to avoid single-minded mindset. You have to have a diversity of different ideas around the table. So it's a balance between, I'll say, collaboration and diversification of ideas. It's important to promote that. And if you want to attract investors, or you want to build an ecosystem around the mining sector, make sure that you have a complete financial network that can support all the stages, not only exploration, but if you find something, will you be able to advance it to development and then to production? It's easy to say, but maybe sometimes could be hard in some jurisdiction, I think.
Exactly. What about Angie? What do you think from a private investment banker perspective?
Well, maybe my 2 cents. It goes back to what you said in your opening comments, Frank. You set the stage for how important economically the mining sector is to Quebec, which then kind of kickstarts why is it so important to us, then the cultural alignment to make it happen. So we talked about self-fulfilling. We're a very mature model here, so getting something started, you have to pick one spot on that ecosystem to kickstart, and then everything else falls into place. But also what Serge was saying about complementary, I mean, the funds have different mandates. They are overlapping to some extent, but we have a variety of tools that all work in cohesion for the ecosystem to go forward. So if a new, and this happened in real life, somebody advising Manitoba called me and said, how can I talk to CDEX? And you put them in touch with each other, but still, where do you start, and what is the it's that I think is the hardest to get the momentum going. You have to pick a single area of focus to get everybody aligned, have access to the funding, and then make it important to everybody. So sounds easier than it is.
Yeah, I believe probably about having government support in this culture. I think the importance of a culture we talked about, right? I mean, I've told this story to you before, but I mean, I've been in front of ministers, mine ministers, who've looked at, let's say, the structure of CDEX, which was, we'll say, a joint venture between the Fonds de solidarité and the government. It's a $100 million fund, and they invest in diversification and support projects that are very risky. And the minister was just scratching his head. He says, how are you able to convince, government officials to make investments that are so risky? And I think it all goes to the culture, right? Because we understand that the need to do that, and because it's part of the business. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth of just to tag along on what Paul has said. I've got a question here, maybe probably I probably already know the answer, but to ask, is there any Quebec funds that invest in exploration outside of Canada? I think I only know of one, and he unfortunately couldn't make it today, is Stéphane Poitras de Caisse de Dépôt. I think will invest in projects outside of Quebec, but I think each of you, yes, Serge?
Well, in theory, I can do it, Frank, but for now, we have focused mainly on exploration projects located in Quebec. But we finance companies that are based outside of Quebec, any part of the world, Australian companies, American companies that want to do exploration in Quebec. That the trend that we took at the fund.
Okay. You and Paul, I mean, the answer is no, I think, for each of your respective funds. So I don't think we need to you know, I'm getting a comment from somebody who's, he says, present in Manitoba, Northwest Territories, and in Ontario, and very interested in this model that we've explored today. Maybe our last question is probably, I don't know if this one comes from either somebody looking to invest in Quebec or somebody that's already in Quebec and looking to see what your answer is. The question is, well, you know, what's the future for in your opinion, what's the future for mining in Quebec, and how do you think the funds, your respective funds, are going to contribute to it? You want to start?
Yeah, I think, well, the future is bright. Paul mentioned that we've come up, we're the 6th ranked position and we're aiming for #1, but no, I think the future is bright. We have the expertise. It's been developed over a number of years. We have a bunch of minerals that are available and a vast territory that has not been explored. So there's definitely opportunities there. You see new minerals today with the battery value chain that is being developed. We have rare earths, we have all the minerals, so and we have the ecosystem. So and like I said earlier, the governments, whichever the color, they're supportive of mining. So I don't see that trend changing in the coming years, and so for me, future is bright.
I'll jump in there, Frank. I mean, I agree with Amiot. I think the future is bright, but with the proviso that you know, we have to keep innovating and looking ahead, because what worked 10 or 20 years ago doesn't work today necessarily, right? And so we have to, be it from a geological perspective, we have to go inside the boundaries, whether it's from a marketing perspective with the battery materials. We have to think forward. We have to think partners. We have to think on a world scale, on a global scale. Everyone has its every sort of niche has its challenges, and we can't sort of sit on our laurels. We have to really look ahead and keep innovating.
Serge, you want to?
Well, I also see a bright future, but I'm quite cautious when everybody thinks that it will be that bright, because I'm afraid of a market high, but I don't think we're there yet. I think that we have a good environment, a general environment for the commodity prices coming ahead. I won't say more than 1.5 to 2 years. It's hard to do projections, but even if the markets would retreat, the fund would still be there. I said it in my introduction. We were there when the times were tough. We will also continue to be there. I hope my organization will still be part of this sector. Paul said it. We have to be aware of new technologies. It goes fast. There are things that are being developed around the globe that could impact us, especially our drillers, our geophysic guy, and we have to be aware of those technologies. We hear about the mine of the future, the 4.0 mines. Technologies are coming, so we have to be aware and to try to support those initiatives. We see great value in those areas in the future thing, and that is, I think we will be willing to support innovation initiative in the mining sector.
Thanks, Serge. Angelina, your thoughts?
Okay, well, maybe if I could jump off of what I saw last year, right, in terms of all the financings that we did, mostly gold. Obviously, it was a historic year for gold and gold pricing. What's ahead in the future? I see a shift. obviously not gold as much, but it'll always be key to here in Quebec. But the move to critical and strategic materials, we talked about innovation, we're talking about AI, we're talking about ESG. So we're, oftentimes innovation is driving the ESG, or and vice versa. So they're intricately linked as well, and they're not only tied to gold and base metals. So we're talking about all the other materials that we've discussed today in the panel. So that's what I think is happening here in Quebec. I also think another key theme is consolidation. We have seen a number of M&A activities in the last year, and I think that's only going to continue in Quebec. I also think that we've seen an influx of new capital and new players, big ones here in Quebec that we haven't seen before, and I think that's going to continue. I said a couple of times we've seen an influx of Australian capital, playing on the charity flow-through model, but also just generally taking interest in assets here. There is a difference in, or an arbitrage, if you will, in value in terms of how companies are perceived on the ASX and the TSXV, and so there's some advantage to be taken of that. And finally, big companies, for example, BHP coming in and investing with Midland, that's not going to stop, right? I think that we really have a jurisdiction here that has the right risk tolerances for larger companies that are now happy with their balance sheets coming out of this downswing, and now are looking to invest, and we're
Great.
Open and ready. That's
well, yeah. Well, that was a good closing remark, Angie. We're at 1:30. It's done. Listen, I want to thank all of you. When I thought about hosting the seminar, is because I wanted people to see exactly, what's this ecosystem about? How is it, how is it created? Why? And all of you, how do you collaborate? And what's the ABC of trying to put something together? I hope the audience appreciated the answers today. I certainly appreciated our discussions. I thank you again, each of you, for accepting my invitation. And I hope we get to do this again in person soon. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Frank.